So thanks everyone for joining. It's so nice to have so many people here already and for more and more folks to be joining in for our webinar on building an appetite for advocacy, where we're really focusing on strategizing for food movements under our new government. Um, Feel free to present yourself in the chat, indicate where you're calling from. My name is Marissa Alexander, the Executive Director at Food Secure Canada, and I have the pleasure of moderating the webinar today. Just a couple things. J'aimerais vous avertir que cette présentation sera interprétée. Donc, pour ceux désirant de l'écouter en français, vous pouvez appuyer sur le bouton en bas sous forme de globe et cliquer sur français. Merci Juliette pour faire cela pour nous. Attendees are going to be muted as mentioned throughout the webinar. We also have cameras turned off just to make the stream a little bit easier for folks. So if you are trying to turn it on and you're not able to, that is why. But please make use of our chat. We will be keeping a close eye on it, and we'd love to see everybody after. We absolutely can share slides afterwards. And then if you have any technical issues, let us know in the chat. We'll help out as best as possible. Et n'hésitez pas à poser vos questions et commentaires en français si vous en désirez. So we will be responding in English and French as best as possible. The webinar is going to be recorded for folks that can't make it live, and we will be adding it to our YouTube shortly after. So if you do have to leave early, or if you're feeling like you need to rewatch all the great information, you can go check that out on our newsletter. We'll send out the link and it'll be on Food Secure Canada's YouTube. Okay. I would like to acknowledge that I am calling in from the traditional and unceded territory of the Lheidli, which is in northern BC. However, Food Secure Canada, it does work that's carried out across Indigenous lands, coast to coast to coast. We are based in Chochage on the Ganagahagan territory, but we do work across Turtle Island and many different traditional territories, and we're very honored to be able to do that. We are in the continuous process of learning and unlearning in order to decolonize all of our practices and center the voices of those that are historically marginalized and excluded from our food systems, particularly those of the original Indigenous peoples. Okay, so Mark Carney's victory means another potential 5 years of liberal government. But with 1 in 4 Canadian households struggling to put food on the table and Trump's tariffs hanging over us, we can't just keep doing the same old thing. Good news, people are fired up about real solutions, and you can tell based on everyone attending this webinar and what we're hearing coast to coast to coast. We've seen it with the Buy Canadian movement and everyone's frustration over the grocery bills. So this is our moment to take that energy and turn it into policy wins that our communities actually need. In this webinar, we will break down what the new government really seems to care about, find the best ways to get food policy on their radar, and share what we're doing to turn public anger into real change. Together, we can actually shift how Canada thinks about food, but we need to be smart and we need to move fast while we have their attention. In this webinar, we will decode the new government's priorities, identify strategic entry points for food policy advocacy, and share what we're doing to transform public appetite for change into concrete campaign victories. Together, we have the power to reshape Canada's food landscape, but only if we move strategically and act boldly in these critical early months of the new government. We have 3 wonderful presenters who are generously offering their time and expertise. I will present each of them individually before their presentation. And then we will also, as mentioned, have space for questions after all of the presenters are done. We have a couple announcements before we get into our speakers. So our first one, if you could go to the next slide there, is that FSC has put out a statement on the use of food as a weapon in Gaza. And despite using that picture, we're obviously not happy about it. It's really, really problematic. We denounce the use of food as a weapon and forced starvation in Gaza, as well as genocide. And if you are interested in signing on to our statement, please feel free to do so. We'll share the link as well. It's a critical time, and we want to be on the right side of history, folks, where we are standing up against using food as a weapon. And I think this is where FSC and food folks like yourself can really use our voice as well. Another thing that you can sign on to if you are interested is FSC's pre-budget submission in advance of the upcoming federal budget. As we know, this is a really powerful way to get our voices heard around what we want in the budget and to really influence pieces of policy and of change in government. So there's still time. As you can see, over 60 organizations have already signed on. So please feel free to go ahead and sign on as well if you are interested in being a part of that as well. And then the last piece, which is a little bit more exciting, you're hearing it first here, folks. We are starting a new series called the Food Systems Learning Circle that we're really excited about because we know the value of education and knowledge and being able to share knowledge across our sector and sectors. I think we're all doing really, really important work. And as this webinar shows, there's a lot of people who want to hear from each other and want to learn from each other to make sure we are working together. And so we are starting a new series, this Food Systems Learning Circle, and we are just sort of teasing the topic here for you that we're going to be doing a food policy deep dive workshop upcoming October 29th. It's a Wednesday as well. And it's going to be about 2 hours, and we are not going to tell you who's going to be on there yet, but if you are interested and excited, please go ahead and register at the link in the chat there. This is going to be the first of hopefully quite a few different food systems learning circles that folks can join and learn a little bit more from folks across the sector here. We are going to share the Eventbrite there in our chat as well, and then we'll share it again at the end if you're interested in signing up to learn a little bit more. And I think, as we know, there's a lot of folks here who are interested in policy as you have joined. And so this is only going to delve a little bit deeper into some of the pieces that we can do. Okay. First off, we are going to go to the next person who is our great policy manager, Aaron Vanson-Jan, who works at Food Secure Canada. So he has consulted for political parties and nonprofits on food policy for over a decade and is a published author in economic and environmental policy. He just published his second book. Aaron holds a PhD from the University of London. His academic research has focused on the effects of gentrification on food access in marginalized communities and the history of food banks in Canada. After leading us through a short exercise, Aaron will talk to us about the current government context and what strategic opportunities there are for food systems work today. So I'm going to hand it over to Aaron. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marissa. And just to begin, maybe in the chat, if folks here could take a few, maybe 20 seconds, just take a moment to think about what is your policy goal in the next 5 years. We have a new government that will be in power. We don't know if that will be for 5 years, but what are you looking at? What would you like to see happen in food policy in your community? And feel free to just type that in the chat, and I'll give you a moment to do that. And Andy did just post the link for the workshop in the chat as well for our next workshop coming up.
For anyone who is panicking about all of the different things that are being posted and linked, we will share all of it back out again, so you don't have to do it all right now. Feel free to focus on our brainstorming activity right now.
right? Seeing um, seeing quite a few policies streaming in. So yeah, we've got a few and keep them coming, folks. Maintain Trudeau's engagement in the school food program, a commitment to reduce food insecurity, better employment and housing for trans-identified folks, um, edible perennial hedges around school grounds and public parks. Love it. Affordable and healthy food for everyone. Access to land for agency as part of food sovereignty. Support and funding local and regional food production. These are all great. Sécurité alimentaire pour tous et toutes et l'autonomie alimentaire des territoires financiers est encouragée. Yes, we will share our slides afterwards in a recording on YouTube. Access locally grown, fresh, affordable, nutritious, and chemical-free food. Fully funded national school food policy. These are all amazing, and yeah, please keep them coming. And part of what we're seeing is, yeah, we're seeing a lot of convergence for different policies, and there's just so many things that we want to get done with this new government. And to in the next few minutes, I'm gonna talk about what the current government is, how they're framing things, and what kind of potential we can have as in our movements to try to push policy forward, and what us at Food Secure Canada and our core coalition partners are doing right now. And just briefly, during the election, we held a campaign called Eat, Think, Vote. And we had 12 incredible events, basically where communities invited political candidates to talk about the issues that matter for them. And during that campaign, we also published a few op-eds. We were trying to intervene and you really frame the discussion around that was happening during the election around national sovereignty. And one op-ed Marissa and Wade authored was to talk about why food sovereignty is important in this moment. And then the other one was an analysis of the Liberal Party platform once they won, on what are their what do we see as the challenges and opportunities for food policy now that the Liberal Party has won. And part of this presentation I'm giving is based on that. But really, during the campaign, I had to live inside the head of the major parties in Canada and their leaders, and through that have tried to really understand where they're coming from. And also during the campaign, we worked really closely with our partners and developed these 10 key policy ingredients for food sovereignty. And you can go on the Eat Think Vote website to check them out. But the short of it is that food policy is very broad because we have a lot of different parts of a food system. And Food Secure Canada always takes a food system approach. So that can make it challenging sometimes to focus what we want to do, but it also means that we can build wide coalitions with many diverse partners, such as many of you here joining us. So given that I lived inside Mark Carney's head for a very long time, I can tell you a little bit about what he's thinking and how he's been framing the political narrative today. So what's the problem that Canada is facing? Um, these are words that he'll use a lot and that the Liberal Party uses a lot, and you'll see repeated in their platform, in the Prime Minister's mandate letter, and in a lot of interviews that he does. So we're facing unprecedented challenges. He's calling this a hinge moment of history, a crisis and a rupture in the international world order. A lot of this is due to Donald Trump's tariffs, but it really has roots in a lot of other issues as well, like a realignment of global political forces. But the good thing, according to Mark Carney, is that we have values that bring us all together. We believe in Canadian sovereignty, resilience, ambition, unity, strength. And what are we going to do with those values? We are going to do a lot of building, nation building, building the strongest economy in the G7, build Canada strong, build, build, build. So that's really a lot of what they're proposing right now. And to uh, to get there, we're going to see um, some humility. There's a need for humility to get to these goals. This is this idea that we need to spend less and invest more. We need to catalyze private investment. But a lot of what's been coming out lately is that they've acknowledged that we are going to need austerity to meet our goals of productivity, economic growth, and competitiveness. We are going to see cost cutting. So what do you notice here? And feel free to add in the chat as well, but I'm going to draw a few different lessons. So this idea of spending less, investing more, they're really reconciling this fiscal conservatism that we've usually seen from the Conservative Party with this idea of liberal interventionism. So it's really bringing the two together. But we're also seeing a lot less emphasis from the Trudeau area on social justice language, multiculturalism, redistributive policies. It's still there, but that's not really what's front and center. And yeah, really, we're seeing this kind of revitalized economic nationalism and state-led development. And just to summarize, what I take from this is that we are in a very different moment than we were with Trudeau. We still have the Liberal Party and still have a lot of the same people, but the way they frame issues, the way that the language that they use is very different. And also it really does mean that some of the strategy that we drew on of drawing on social justice concerns might not work as well. So given what I just said, I'd like you to maybe take a moment and rewrite your policy goal using Mark Carney's language. Try to
Aaron, are you still there? Did you freeze? Okay, I think I can pick up what he was saying. Rewrite what you already wrote, but using some of that language. Yes, thanks, Jennifer. It looks great. Build better employment opportunities. Beautiful. Invest in permanent yearly financing of the basic mission of food banks. Exactly. hmm Invest in household wealth. I love it. Hi, Aaron. Are you back?
yes. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
The slides also cut out, just a heads up.
Okay.
Catalyze the Canadian economy by investing in ambitious, guaranteed, livable basic income. Great work, Matt. That sounds very good.
This is great. It was a bit awkward because my screen froze and I just thought no one really cared about my question. And I wasn't seeing any. I was panicking for a second. Build edible perennial hedges. Yeah, I love it. So, we've done a bit of thinking with our partners to think about how do we kind of reframe some of these 10 policies that I mentioned before to really orient them around uh, building wins with the current party in power. So this is just a little snapshot of these policies. What we've seen is in the Liberal platform and what they've been talking about is a total commitment to school food. And now our friends who are in the Healthy School Food Coalition, they're still building the movement and really built continuing to hold their feet to the fire. But really, what we've seen is that the party is committing to school food as a option, as a key policy. And tied to that, they're also promising that they're going to be uh, leading by Canadian in public procurement. So that's any federal building, government building, but also hospitals, um, potentially schools, military buildings. So they're saying that they're going to focus on buy Canadian. They didn't specify food, but that's something we can definitely try to push for. And then another thing we saw is that um, again and again, they have said that they are supporting supply management. This is a system that is uniquely Canadian that protects a lot of Canadian farmers and key industries from um, being undercut and offers protections to farmers. Um, and it's really important that that is on the table, and they've explicitly said that that's on the table. I gave it an A minus because we still have to see. We don't know what is going on here, but we're like really hoping that our key partners, like the National Farmers Union, continues to hold the government's feet to the fire here. But then we kind of have. I'm not going to go through each of these one by one, but we have a kind of mix here of how they're dealing with other policies. For example, with Indigenous food sovereignty, there's a lot of language in there around reconciliation, but it's rather vague. And they have said that they are going to basically cancel and redo the Nutrition North program, but we still have to see. And a lot of this is now tied to their language around militarization and nation building. Um, so this is a real space for conflict and potential need for more movement support. Cost of living, there's some language around tax reform and some action around that, but it really won't address some of the major issues that we're seeing around food insecurity and poverty in the country. Um, and similar with structural racism in the food system, what we see is, 40% of Black and Indigenous people um, have seeing food insecurity. Um, so it is a real system that is structured around racism and affects marginalized people the most. And we don't see any language in their platform, in their policies that is going to address this. Um, Similarly, actually, with a temporary workers program, we don't really see anything that they are changing around that looks very positive. Um, and competition, I'll let Keldon talk about that. Uh, so it's a bit of a mixed bag, and there's lots of opportunity here for strategizing. So what have we decided to do? We've developed a pre-budget submission at Food Secure Canada and really closely with our partners like the Food Communities Network. And I'm going to let Mo talk about the top three there. Um, but I can briefly talk about the last recommendation that we gave to the government, which is adjusting the Canada Child Benefit. Um, and this really we're what we're doing here is, we know that a lot of our partners are pushing for basic income, pushing for different kinds of policies like um, grocery um, the grocery benefits. But what working closely with our partner Proof, what we saw was that here is one space for language that kind of fits the language that the government is using, where we can say, if you adjust the Canada Child Benefit, raise the level so that people get it for much longer, until their kids are 16, and reduce it for people in high taxation brackets, it's going to be more efficient, using that language of efficiency, and it's going to work better and lead to more investments. But that also, recognizing the issue of northern food insecurity, that this needs to be adjusted for northern territories. So that's a very small part. And we know that a lot of our allies and partners are also making other kinds of recommendations. But just to say here, what we're seeing is that the government is claiming that some policies are policies designed to address food insecurity, when that might not be the case. So, for example, school food, we have to be really careful. This is not necessarily a policy designed to address household food insecurity. It might help, but what we know helps the most is income. So, improving people's income. And so we really see the need to make it clear to this government that food insecurity won't be addressed through what could be called like community measures, to improve food access. So we really have to be careful there, and that's one of the ways that we've been trying to strategize with this new government using their language, and seeing what key policies we can push for that are strategic. So all that said, I've talked for a little bit too long, I think. And I wanted to pass it on to Rachel, who works with Right to Food and previously called Community Food Centers. Sorry, Community Food Centers Canada. And she's going to tell us about what they've been working on, which aligns very closely.
Thank you, Aaron. You can hear me okay? So hello, everyone. It's really wonderful to see so many people in the room. It just goes to show how much collective power we have as folks who are in the food security and food justice sector and movement. And thank you again, Aaron and Marissa, for having me and for, spearheading these conversations. I think it's important that we continue to learn together and to build these movements with one another in constant conversation and discussion. So I am Rachel. I work at the Depot Community Food Center in Montreal as their advocacy and community engagement coordinator. And I work in close collaboration with Right to Food, which is formerly known as Community Food Centers Canada, coordinating their Quebec-based regional hub. So I work alongside and in collaboration with my colleagues who coordinate the regions of Ontario, of British Columbia, of the Atlantic provinces, and of the Inuit Nunangat region in the north. And for those in the room today who are not aware, Right to Food is a pan-Canadian organization with over 450 member organizations that are all community-based organizations. There's probably quite a few good food organizations, community-based organizations that are part of this network in the room today. And the Poverty Action Unit is a department of Right to Food that works to tackle the root causes of food insecurity by pairing policy solutions with grassroots movement building directly with these 450 partners and tied to the realities that we are witnessing on the ground as frontline organizations. So Right to Food develops issue briefs, pre-budget submissions just like Had, and helps to fund frontline organizational members to gather their political reps to talk about policy. So really empowering community members in our food centers to talk to MPs, to get involved in these political discussions, and to advocate for real change that makes a difference in our communities. So through civic engagement like this, our network is advocating for various policy pieces, things like income support and public programs that meet the true cost of living today, things like national food insecurity targets that hold policymakers accountable, as well as equitable access to government social programs. And very important piece as well is defending and continuing to advance Indigenous food sovereignty, which is very much spearheaded by Right to Food's Indigenous networks and Indigenous-led food centers. So really supporting Indigenous communities working to reclaim their land, restore their food systems, and build long-term community-driven solutions. So my presentation is very brief, but thank you for letting me very briefly talk a little bit about what we're doing, what some of our main policy asks are, and I am available to answer any questions at the end of everybody's presentations. And I'll add some links in the chat as well to Right to Food's website with more information on their policy positions and their most recent pre-budget submissions. And if there's any regional coordinators of the Poverty Action Unit who are in the room today, feel free to drop your email in the chat as well as the region that you're coordinating in case there's folks that would want to get in touch directly with you and work on the different policy pieces and advocacy that we are doing collectively together. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks for joining and much appreciated sharing what's going on in your neck of the woods. I feel like it's gonna take a little bit to get used to Right to Food. It's such a good name, but yeah, CFCC has been an institution, and so it's exciting to see the change. But yeah, every time I see it, I'm like, yeah. So anyway, you're probably experiencing that as well.
Definitely, definitely. It's gonna take a while, but it's also reflective of the types of advocacy work that they've been participating in and continuing to push for the next few years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate you joining, and I think this really demonstrates how, like we are all doing similar but different work across food sectors and food systems, and it's so important to stay connected so we're not repeating anything, and we're really getting behind folks that are doing stuff that we maybe don't have capacity to do, but is making a really huge difference. So thanks for joining us, Rachel. Okay, moving on, I'm going to pass it over to Mo Garahan. So Mo has been working on food and farming issues since 1995. They are focused on community development and community economic development approaches. She has facilitated the establishment of many ongoing community and regional food initiatives while supporting provincial and coast to coast to coast food systems change. She is the partnership coordinator of Food Communities Network, FCN, and core coalition partner of us here at Food Secure Canada. We are happy to have you, Mo. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Marissa and Aaron. All right. So, and for everyone that's spoken already, this webinar on building an appetite for advocacy, I've been asked to speak to the first three policy items that Food Secure Canada put forward in a pre-budget submission on behalf of a lot of partners, and Food Communities Network was the key partner to put together those first three ones. When I speak today about regional or local, I'm referring to sub-provincial, sub-territorial at a community regional level. And these first three policy items came out of consensus building talks, a lot of them across industry leads, academic leads, and community-based agricultural organizations working with established and new farmers, ranchers, fishers, including new Canadians, connected to farming and food systems. And so I'm going to go through these 3 recommendations, and then I'm going to leave you with 4 actions that I'm hoping that everyone here can be motivated to take on board. So recommendation 1 is listed here, and I'm going to just touch on a few things, but I really hope that you read the full brief. Erin's going to include the link to the submission again during the talk. There's lots of time to still sign on to this, but more importantly, I'd like you to take a look at that backgrounder because it does give a lot of important information for you to understand the issues a bit more deeply to be able to speak to them. But what I want to speak to about this first one about balancing investment is that there has truly been a significant imbalance of federal investment over 50 years, more than 50 years plus, leading to long-term disproportionate support of export-based food, agriculture and fisheries over local, regional, produced or harvested foods. This has led to a focus on producing raw commodities to export and not looking at our value add and centralizing our food processing here in Canada, which erodes regional value chains and creates infrastructure deserts. So we're looking for a reorientation of funding that invests in diverse, local, regional, sustainable food production and harvesting that builds markets where we are in our communities, coast to coast to coast. The unfortunate thing is with this disproportionate investment over decades is that we're now at a point where trade at federal levels only refers to global trade. It doesn't even refer to domestic trade. Domestic production, food grown, harvested, or raised locally to sell to local eaters is now more often identified as unable to feed our population, a hobby, not viable, niche. Some may agree that long-term imbalance of federal investment in local food has happened, of course, but they will still argue that now that we're here, we have to keep going on with the focus on developing new export markets as the only priority. And what I like about the consensus building work that's been done is there is no question that we need to diversify our export markets. But what we're all saying in the partners that are signed on to this submission is if we're looking to build back infrastructure for the long term, if we're looking about sovereignty, if we're looking at a thriving economy, then let's proportionately reinvest in our local infrastructure, in our local farmers, fishers, new farmers, access to land, access to capitalization, better risk management programs to support a changing economy and changing climate challenges. Better succession that favors succession across non-family members, investing in regional food processing capacity so that we can do value add in our own communities. Because without doing this, due to the geopolitical changes that were now acutely being felt with US, but we've experienced this before with other countries, or the natural disasters like floods and droughts and wildfires that impact our global supply chain, we will be continually subjected to instability in our food supply. And I just want to leave with the fact that there are, and this is fact, thousands of Indigenous and Canadian-born and new Canadian people who want to grow, harvest, and raise food to sell to their communities. This is a fact. And based on the lack of infrastructure to support better land access, zoning, official planning, right up through to federal policy, this has become something that's not possible at our community level. So this first recommendation is really asking for a balancing, not a removal of export investment, but a balancing with domestic production. All right, number 2. This recommendation is focused on supporting local food procurement. And you may not know that Canada's institutional food service market represents $6.6 billion annually. So that's across hospitals, schools, correctional facilities, residential care facilities, military bases, government offices. This is a massive purchasing power, and it operates with limited coordination, very minimal focus on Canadian procurement, and represents a significant missed opportunity for economic development and food system resilience. So Food Communities Networks, along with most of us on the call here today, we're interested in solutions that invest equitably into economies and communities coast to coast to coast, so that we are building an economy for all. And so the discussion and the mandate of using dollars differently to maximize benefits to residents, this we think can happen by using public procurement dollars in a way that promotes ambitious use of regional grown and raised foods. So one example is in the nation building project of the school food program, that this could be used to transform our local food economies if there is a genuine emphasis on regionally specific targets for dollars to be used to purchase locally regional products first, including those products being transformed, processed, cooked in our own communities, then to provincial territory targets, then to Foods Across Indigenous Territories Canada. This would actually use this federal funding and the cost sharing that will come with it at provincial and municipal levels, territorial as well, to build equitable investment at community levels. And it does allow for maximizing the potential for a quadruple bottom line for economic, environmental, social, and cultural benefits. So that's what the second recommendation is. And then the third recommendation, this one is very clearly maps to the mandate letter, something that is a very common ask across leads industry academically and community-wise to reduce regulatory burdens and inter-provincial trade barriers. But we just want to emphasize that we want that done in a way that still ensures economic feasibility for smaller, locally focused businesses, encouraging new participation in the market. And so there can be a dismantling of regulation that unintentionally damages local regional supply chains, local regional businesses. And we want this done in a way that's very cognizant of the impact and ensures the viability of our communities coast, coast, coast. And so that brings us to the action piece. These policy asks, like I mentioned, were vetted widely and with the goal to build common ground. So these solutions are not contested. They are considered critical coast to coast to coast. And this type of significant consensus building takes work and time and commitment. And so we're asking for all of you on this call to demonstrate a support and add to this consensus building along with the fourth recommendation that Aaron outlined. And we're asking for 4 actions. So to read and sign this pre-submission document submitted by FSC on behalf of all of us partners, including the backgrounder that I mentioned that's linked into that submission so that you can learn more details about these items. We want to ask, Rachel and Marissa, you were just speaking about the synergies that are developing across networks and across groups, across coast, coast, coast. And we want to ask that you spend some time in your work to focus on collaboration across networks and be embedded in networks that connect to your work and prioritize some of that time towards building consensus and adding your input from your expertise and taking some of that time to advocate to your local government representatives. And so the third action is to meet with your MP about this pre-budget submission. So there will be resources that includes a 1-pager to support those meetings that you can leave with your MP, and that'll be included in the package that's sent out to everyone participating here, and will also be sent out through Food Communities Network. And the last one is a more long-term one, and it's about asking you to continue to see yourself included in a broader food production, food systems mandate that includes agriculture and includes fisheries and includes seeds, even if you are firmly rooted in an urban context. We need your voices to support rural and remote communities coast to coast on this. And this is because we're under 2% of farmers, for example, coast to coast to coast, and a much smaller percentage of that who are serving local regional markets. So that can't be what shifts these policies. But more important to that, the connection between the urban and rural and remote, and this concept of, we know with greater urbanization, most of us are at the city level. And so sometimes our food system or even our food production, understanding of our food supply might just extend to work on residential gardening, which is great stuff, and we need that. But we need to have everyone understand that the connections to agriculture, to fisheries, to our food supply is part of your mandate, that it's not peripheral to your work. It's essential. So that if you care about food insecurity, if you care about employment, if you care about labor issues, if you care about immigration, if you care about building resilient, healthy, inclusive communities, if you care about culturally relevant foods, if you care about preserving productive capacity of our forests and our lands and our waters, and most particularly, if you care about equitably increasing resilience across communities to better handle the economic and political and climate shocks, noting that these shocks do disproportionately affect our most vulnerable populations, then these issues are your issues. And so to please take some time, not just today, but as we move forward, to strengthen these common ground issues that we see and to use our voice, because I really do believe that we are in a moment where we can influence the direction that our federal investment dollars are going. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mo. I really appreciate that. And then, yeah, Erin has shared the link to the pre-budget submission that Mo has been referencing again, if folks are interested in please signing on. Thanks. Thanks for sharing, Mo. Okay. Our last panelist is Keldon Bester. He's the executive director of the Canadian Anti-Monopoly Project and a fellow at the Centre for International Governance Innovation. Keldon has worked as a special advisor at Canada's Competition Bureau and as a fellow at the Open Markets Institute in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us, Keldon.
Thanks so much for having me. Can you hear me all right? Oh, perfect. So get my stopwatch going here. Yeah, so as Marissa mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Canadian Anti-Monopoly Project, or CAMP. And I think in a sentence, CAMP is a think tank that focuses on the question of monopoly. And generally what we mean by monopoly is, concentrations of private power, how those affect our economy, how they affect Canadians as consumers, workers, entrepreneurs, and, in this case, farmers and producers of food. I want to take a little bit of time talking today about, I think something that people will be very familiar with, which is the state of monopoly in the food system, and a little bit more about what competition policy law and what I think the sort of anti-monopoly framing can be helpful for a range of goals that I think that I'm optimistic will resonate with the current federal government. So you hit the next slide, please. So this is not going to shock anybody, but Canada's food system is in fact highly monopolized. And while we had a lot of really good attention, I think in the past couple of years in the state of play at the retail grocery level, calling the grocery CEOs in, looking at the past acquisitions and roll-ups in the market, the further you go up the chain, the worse it is. So, farming and equipment manufacturing and reselling, there's about 3 companies controlling 90% of that market. 2, 3 companies control many seed varieties. The stat here refers to canola in particular. 2 companies are responsible for almost all the beef processing slaughterhouses across Canada, and the story is worse regionally. And similar story for grain processing and handling. Now, these are just a handful of examples, but sort of pick a food category and look up the chain, and the story is quite similar. Next slide, please. So that's the bad news. That's the current state. The good news is that in a particular body of law that you've probably never heard about, there have been some improvements and some reasons for optimism. So put really quickly, competition law in Canada, it's a federal law executed by the Competition Bureau, which is a federal law enforcement agency, and it concerns things like mergers and acquisitions, cartels like the bread price fixing scandal between Loblaws and the other grocers, as well as something called abusive dominance, which is, one firm or firms in concert using their monopoly power to harm competition, raise prices, and the like. And so this for many years was a very pro-consolidation, very light touch body of law, and we can see the results. And over the past couple of years, CAMP, along with other individuals and organizations, have been pushing for changes to that law. And in 2023 and 2024, we were successful in getting the federal government to move pretty dramatically on improvements to the law. And so now the bar for mergers that reduce competition is much higher. We have a stronger abuse of dominance protections. And this third one, I apologize, this makes basically no sense out of context. But today, instead of just the federal government, individuals, organizations, and companies can bring cases under the competition law to try to push back against some of these monopolies. And so we have this highly consolidated state. We had a bit of a loser kind of law, but now we've got a new set of tools, and we can think about what we want to be doing with them now. So next slide, please. And at least at the federal level, the Competition Bureau seems to recognize that there is an issue here. They did a retail grocery market study showing that grocery margins had either remained flat or expanded after the pandemic. They've got an ongoing investigation that's leading Loblaws and Sobeys to abandon property controls that restrict competing grocers from opening. And to their credit, the Bureau came out against the Bunge-Viterra grain processing and handling merger, although the Department of Transport ultimately approved it. And so at the federal level, we have a regulator who is starting to learn that it has a strong set of tools and that those should be pointed at different parts of the food system. Next slide, please. And this is where I think up that chain is where a lot of our, I say that very broadly, attention can be focused, and that we might find receptive audiences for the federal government. So I have a good graphic, and I don't know why I included it, but producers, that is farmers, ranchers, so on and so forth, and consumers, we are the least concentrated segments of the food system. We bear the most risk. We have the most costs shifted to us from other parts of the food chain, which have consolidated around a handful of players. So I think there is actually a lot of progress to be made around deconcentrating and mitigating corporate power in these sort of intermediate segments of the food chain that don't often get a lot of play in our policy discourse. Next slide, please. A big part of that, and there's no chat with me that doesn't go to the railroads, is thinking beyond the traditional food system as we think about the steps and the things that enable that. So transportation, particularly our duopoly rail market, trucking, pieces of infrastructure like the Ontario Food Terminal. I would encourage people to think about these enablers of the food system that I find are often outside of the conversation or understood in the confines of transportation policy. And here we have some interesting potential alliances between very established major shippers who themselves are kind of captive to these rail markets. So railroads really are the founding monopoly of this country and many other countries. And I would encourage folks to think about how that is one of the feedback loops that reinforces monopoly in the food system, as well as I think creates opportunity for some interesting partnerships, I think. Next slide. This slide, I threw it together, and in retrospect, I don't think it's that interesting. All of it is to say is both at the federal level and the provincial level, this is where CAMP spends most of our time thinking about, so apologies to the other levels of government. There's a lot of levers we can be pulling or asking policymakers to pull that I think haven't been talked about as much in recent years. And so, like I said, that's transportation, that's competition policy, investigations, studies, opening up these markets that are pretty black boxes. And I think what we've been talking about earlier today, investment, public breeding programs, Farm Credit Canada, each of these things can be um, countervailing power to the monopolization that we see today. Next slide. This is my standard slide on, regulation and deconsolidation are two things that have to kind of walk hand in hand. When we have a situation where there really are only two or three companies, we have to think about how do we, break these markets open. And if we can't do that, how do we regulate? And understanding when to use which of these tools. The concept of a breakup, this is taking one company and splitting it into two, spinning off important assets, breaking open economic bottlenecks. This is pretty new to I mean, it's a very old idea, but I don't think the government is there. The previous government wasn't there either. And so at camp, this is something we're going to be spending a lot of time doing, and I think is a complement to efforts to regulate, as well as those uh, programs of investment redistribution. One more slide now. Coming in under time. So this would be my pitch portion of the deck, which is I think there is both an opportunity to rebalance power in Canada's food system and deliver for consumers and producers in a way that fits in how we think this government thinks about the problems it's facing. Cost of living is back as the top priority. And I have a feeling that this government may struggle to find its feet when focused on when dealing with these more micro issues. I think they're more comfortable at the macro level, and this is where we can fill in the gaps. And an anti-monopoly approach to the food system is one that I see being able to meet a lot of disparate policy goals. People can, have the either symptom or cause that aligns more with what they are aiming for and the solution they're trying to bring about, while keeping it in that more sort of economic language that I think Aaron did a good job highlighting at the start of this. And I'll end on saying, the F for competition in the liberal platform, I think was well earned, but I think that that's an opportunity to improve on, and that this anti-monopoly way of thinking is a way to take a very non-economic conversation sometimes and bring it into language that sort of that the Carney government seems much more familiar with. And that's it for me. 30 seconds over.
We have some wiggle room. So if you need to say anything else,
no, that's great. Last slide is just a logo, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much, Keldon. I think I'm reflecting a little bit on all of the things that we've been chatting about. I think this really speaks to what Food Secure Canada has been talking about for a while now, and what came up quite a bit at our last convening in 2024, which was this shift from the food chains to more of a food web, right? And I think as we're hearing in a lot of these pieces, is there's these really big bottlenecks and this corporate control, and there's this these monopolies that are managing a lot of areas in our food system and specifically in our food chain. And so being able to identify that, and I know for myself, talking about things like corporate concentration, talking about monopolies is like, oh, this feels very big and very challenging and not directly related. But I really, really value you coming and sharing, because I think the more that we have these conversations, the more we recognize the power of, as you're saying, Keldon, looking upstream or looking in higher into our food chain for that ability. Because yes, we have done a lot of really fabulous work at the grocery level, like boycott Loblaws, but we do have so many other places that we could and should be looking for some of that policy work. So I super appreciate you bringing that perspective. I also just appreciate everybody, all the panelists, for sharing your perspectives and for making this like a very, very interesting and very well-rounded panel so far. And I think we have even further potential to expand a little bit more. And we have a decent amount of time for some questions, which I'm really excited about. I very much hope you can't hear my dog chewing so loudly in the background. Okay, good, because it's distracting for me, but I'm hoping that, Zoom's blurred it out. So what we will do is if folks have questions, put them in the chat and we will field those in the chat or raise your hand. And if you raise your hand, it'll be easier for us to find you so we can ask you to unmute if you would like to verbalize your question. And feel free to ask a question to any one of our panelists or all of our panelists if it's something that spans all of our different topics. So I'm just going to give it a couple minutes and we're going to keep our eyes on any of the questions. And then while you're kind of digesting that, there is also some good links in the chat as well. Okay. Yeah, I see. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Oops.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi there. Hi, my name is Fatia and I'm from Food Share Toronto. Thank you again for all the panelists. That was an incredible hour. am so excited to continue these conversations with you folks. So my question, I have two questions. The first one is, how do we resist when provincial governments are prioritizing the needs of developers and gobbling up agricultural lands despite studies advocating for increased density? Just for some context, the Doug Ford government is very very pro developer, and I know that we're speaking kind of at a national level. But just to, when we're thinking about advocating on, just to multiple levels of government, what are some tips for us, who are working at a municipal regional level to sort of create policy recommendations that sort of appease both sort of goals? From the Carney government speaking from a more economic development sort of language, but then also from a Doug Ford government, someone who's just prioritizing, the needs of developers and developing very quickly. And then my second question is, how can we build in social justice commitments given the austerity language being used by, multiple governments across the country, right? Where social justice commitments are being deprioritized in some ways. But yeah, feel free for whoever would like to take a shot at those two questions. Thank you so much.
Did you want me to add into the first one, Marissa?
Please do.
I can add in. Thanks for the question, Fatia. The preservation of land around urban populations is a harsh one. I do feel that changing the language and the value that we place on land used for not used for providing us with food is one that requires a culture shift to value that land, particularly around urban environments where the type of agriculture that we're talking about around direct to consumer is most of value. And so I think that the pressure on preserving land around and extensions of urban boundaries is allowed because of the devaluing of local and regional agriculture, ranching, harvesting efforts. And so that's part of the reason why we're indicating the need for some real culture shifts here in valuing this type of economic activity as one that's more accessible for more people to be engaged in, as one that's more sustainable, closer to urban populations, direct to consumer, and one that we need in our community to be woven into the fabric of urban planning again. And this is a real demonstration of the divide between urban and remote and urban issues. Did I say that right? Urban and then rural and remote issues. So I do think that it's incumbent upon us to have our voices heard as local communities at the federal level to say that this is important to us. Ensure that your local MPs understand that issue so that there could be potentially some more encouragement from federal levels onto municipal and provincial governance. But as well as local communities, we do need to be engaged in official planning processes for those communities that have zoning and official plan processes so that we are a voice at the table. Oftentimes, it is only the development community that is encouraging that urban expansion, and a lot of our food system work has not directly engaged with official plan dialogue and processes, and that's one that we do need more people to be indicating to their local governance that this is critical, that we do have housing solutions that better serve people within, concentration around transportation routes, for example, as opposed to, what's the word? Spreading. There's another word for this if someone has that. Thank you. Urban sprawl. So these are the things that we need to invest more of our time and advocacy efforts in across the board. No matter what specific focus your day-to-day is, these are the things that we need to work hand in hand with more collaboratively. Thanks.
Thanks, Mo. Did anyone else want to add to that question?
I caught the very end of the question, so I will speak to the very little part that I heard. But this concern with the government talking about austerity and cost cutting, how are we going to get this, like push for the kind of income supports that we absolutely still need more than ever. And I don't necessarily have the answer to that. I do think that what we definitely need to do is continue coalition building across our movements and sectors to be able to push for these things, because what's going to happen is you're going to see this government, as Keldon mentioned as well, you're going to see this government kind of feel that they don't really know what to do about the cost of living crisis. They're thinking around building infrastructure, and they haven't really addressed the number one issue that people are feeling. So once they realize that this is an issue that is going to be losing them voters massively and continue to bring voters to the Conservative Party, we need to have coalitions in place that can say these are the things that we need to see happen.
Which is what FSC is aiming to be, alongside groups like Food Communities Networks at those different levels, bringing folks together and being that coalition that government can come to that has perspectives across the food sector. Okay, I'm going to ask Jennifer next to unmute to ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. This has been so informative. My mind is spinning. The thing I was wondering about, and I'd be interested in your perspectives, it seems to me that we've been losing officially titled departments, food strategy departments, the food insecurity departments across all levels of government. They've kind of come and then waned depending on the government of the day. I know here in Toronto, we had the food strategy. It's kind of also fizzled and disappeared. Do you see utility in having a very explicitly named food security hub, so to speak, at a government level? Or I've also heard arguments for the power of decentralizing that work. I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
Do you want me to start, Marissa? I can say thanks for that, Jennifer, and fully agree with your observation that we are losing these elements, particularly the Toronto Food Strategy is a loss given its global leadership for a couple of decades. It was very much noted. And this is at a time when things like the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact are being signed by, I think it's over 330 global cities right now, that mayors and governance at local levels are moving further ahead in the integration of food resilience into policies at municipal levels, and then further up the chain in our governance anyway, at provincial, territorial, and federal. One of the things that we've heard is when items are siloed into something called agriculture or something called food, it can tend to mean that when you go to approach your local MP, you might be blocked by hearing, oh, our MP doesn't work on that file. And there's a lot of stigma, even up to the Senate level, about working on agriculture committee. And again, it goes back to our lack of valuing this and the percentage of people living coast, coast, coast that are interested and see the connections in their day-to-day lives with these issues. And so I'm on the side of encouraging interdepartmental committees at all the levels and really pushing for a full integration of a food systems lens in every department and at all government levels. And I think that there's been so much work to really identify the levers that every single department has in connection to our food systems. And I think that will drive change further, and foster the kind of collaboration across departments and across predominantly siloed mandates that we actually need to address these complex issues that do need the input across these diverse portfolios.
Yeah, just to build quickly on what Mo said, and I think about this in the context of sort of the Competition Bureau. People talk about would it be better if it was more independent or closer to government? And I think governments like to stand up specific bodies and new departments and things like that. But when they do that, they create a new structure that can be sort of outside of or in addition to these existing departments that have their own responsibility. And so I think I would agree it's better to go to these existing places that have jurisdiction over an important, like, the Department of Transportation is not an agriculture department, but it is critically important to the food system, to agriculture, and to how we all get fed. And so I think it's more about going to those places and saying, here's how you need to understand your role as meeting these policy goals that you might not have thought of, as opposed to creating these kind of new hubs.
Erin, did you want to add anything to that, or Rachel, or should I keep going?
Maybe I'll just add one piece that's related to what everybody is speaking about, but what Right to Food is trying to do and what Food Secure Canada is trying to do with all of our members is really have folks who are on the ground, who are experiencing like the direct effects of food insecurity, be involved in the political processes. So we are trying to coordinate as a network that is pan-Canadian with organizations that are on the ground to organize ways in which folks with lived experience and folks who are leading these organizations can have conversations with their MPs directly, by providing policy briefs, by providing tools for folks who are newer to that type of work, and also strategically. So all over Canada, we have almost 500 members where a lot of the MPs that are responsible for those areas are also sitting on specific councils, are have specific roles in government, and so being able to really, use those pieces and use those relationships to our advantage to be able to advance certain policy recommendations, and even just have those conversations be happening internally in government as well. That's important for us as a sector, and to be collaborating too with with folks like the Anti-Monopoly Project and folks like the CHAD, like all of you. It's important that we're really collaborating to make sure that people on the ground are also part of those conversations and having those meetings as well, and providing the tools too for those meetings to happen. Yeah, I just wanted to add that little last piece at the end.
Yeah, and I would also add, what we've seen is, yeah, these initiatives can get siloed in one department. And also what can happen is, they say they will set up this committee, or they say they'll set up a council on the issue, and bring together all these coalitions to advise them. And then once it happens, that coalition kind of goes away. So what we really need as movements is to already have these coalitions in place, so that when these councils are set up, we continue to be advisory bodies that have our own systems of decision making and our own power, so that when those bodies do sometimes fail or stop working or get cut, we still are able to continue our work and continue pushing.
That nicely kind of ties into our pitch around the next workshop that we're doing around sort of a deep dive into food policy specifically. And so if folks are interested in kind of drilling in a little bit more specifically when it comes to food policy, we're going to talk a bit about like where we came from, sort of exactly what Erin is saying, what sort of happened, where it's at now, and how we can kind of move forward, acknowledging that a lot of those pieces did get sort of stuck, like the Canadian, whatever the group, what is it called? Canadian Food Policy Advisory Council. That's what it is. So yeah, Andy's there's our slide there, and Andy is just sharing our workshop there as well, the link. So if you are interested in this, please join us, and we can like learn a little bit more about the fact that we do need to be a little bit more interdepartmental and have these policies that do span bigger topics and not just one department. Okay, we have about 8 minutes left. Hannah Dwyer had asked a question in the chat. I would love if anyone could elaborate on some concrete methods and tactics for working in coalitions long term, more than just coming together for a single action, a sign-on, or a march, etc. And does anyone have ideas about how food sovereignty advocates can build onto the Draw the Line movement building effort right now? Great question, Hannah.
I'd love to start to build upon what Marissa, you shared out, Rachel, what you shared out. Yeah, I'm coming from facilitating the Food Communities Network, trying to do that with quite part-time resources, and knowing that there's over 600 folks in that network that are wanting to connect coast to coast to coast and share our community solutions so that we can build further, faster together. We have the Right to Food Network, newly renamed, that is really focused on resident engagement and people that are directly experiencing poverty and other barriers to accessing good food in their communities in a consistent and respectful way. We have lots of folks on the call that are from different areas of expertise. My hope is that we can coalesce around Food Secure Canada as a key advocate on the joint policy goals, that we are leading from different perspectives, but that I really do look forward to continued infrastructure put in place so that all of us that are working coast to coast to coast on various issues can continue to see where our issues intersect, that we can be building across different movements. You mentioned Draw the Line as a more current movement happening. But I've really enjoyed watching expertise come in on really critical issues over the past couple of years, with expertise brought in by members to assist with position statements, finding consensus, dealing with some of those tricky issues. And so I hope that we can together build a stronger infrastructure with FSE continuing to lead that federal policy and grouping us together in our various expertise of our networks, even as we also share within our network. So I do, it's, the network of networks concept, but I think that this moment calls for that greater collaboration. And I think that a lot of us are ready for that greater collaboration. So, and I don't think it's anything more but nothing less than carving out what amounts to, frankly, in kind time off the sides of our desks and prioritizing those efforts to continue to ensure that we know about when things are being organized, that we ahead of time and don't just sort of hear them announced, so that we can embed different lenses and make sure that we're not inadvertently undermining another issue that we might not fully understand. That we are using our time to make sure that we're sharing information around so that people can engage, that we're finding different ways that people can engage based on their abilities, time, literacy, interests, and that really fundamentally comes down to carving out time in each of our days and each of our workplaces and each of our volunteer spaces to prioritize collaboration.
Well said, Mo. Does anyone want to add anything else to that before we wrap up? Thanks. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I would just say, FSC is a coalition organization, and this is how we've emerged and how we continue to operate. We work closely with a whole coalition of partners. And if you are an organization that's interested in these issues, you work at a national level, or you want to work at a national level, come to us and we'll work together on these issues. And yeah, I just think that we're so much powerful if we're working together. And also that, there is a massive interest in these issues amongst the public, with the Buy Canadian movement, with people being very angry about corporate monopoly right now, as Keldon points out, and Food Secure Canada, not to toot our own horn, like we are one of the only organizations working on a national level on the corporate concentration in the food system, and we need all the support we can get.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And I will absolutely toot our own horn because I do think that it's a double-edged sword where it's very, very important that we're having these conversations. But the more that we have these conversations, the harder it is for FSC to be funded by these big, food-focused organizations that tend to have like some corporate backing. And so the way that we can continue to have these conversations without having to be mindful, we always have to be mindful of what we're saying, but without having restrictions on what we can say or what we can talk about, is by having support from organizations and groups like yourselves, signing up for our new workshop series, donating, supporting all of those pieces to be able to have our own capacity to say what we need to say and talk about the true issues that are at the forefront here. So actually, great timing. We're wrapping up. Unfortunately, can anyone from community sign up to the workshop series? Absolutely, Jennifer. We hope to see you there. It's skills that we hope it's for anybody who wants to learn a little bit more. It's not just organizations, it's anyone who wants to learn a little bit more, and you can integrate that into your own growth and or into your organization or however you want to do it. If you have more questions, just send me an email, marissa@foodsecurecanada.org. There is a couple more questions, but we do not have time, unfortunately. So I will sorry, I'm doing both. I'm trying to read. I will respond to you, Hannah. And I will also just wrap it up. I want to say thank you so much, folks, for joining and for having this conversation. Thank you for giving my dog a platform to do whatever he was doing in the back there. And thanks for having these really, really important conversations. As mentioned, this recording will be up on Food Secure Canada's YouTube channel. We'll share it out in our newsletter. If you are interested in learning a little more and you're maybe not involved, follow Food Secure Canada on our socials. You can join our newsletter and you'll get sort of the most up-to-date information about what's moving forward. Thanks, everybody.